Time now for a look at our viewer submitted photos.
Emily Griffin has our Send It to 7 Pics of the Week.
Send It to 7 Pics of the Week, sponsored by Foy Agency.
The Northern Lights last week were quite the spectacle. Trenton Thompson saw them in Lafargeville. Lori Cummings saw them in Ogdensburg. Joanne Nugent-Ward was at the Sackett's Harbor Battlefield. And Teresa Lundy was in Hammond. This is the time of year for babies. Here's a full nest that Kathy Jesmer is keeping an eye on. And a family of geese in Morristown, taken by Evan Brooks. Also, no ugly ducklings here. These swans at Grass Point State Park were a sight to see for Dan Gable. Here's what looks to be a young hummingbird. Jessica Ames snapped the shot of the little fella. And in Castleland, depicting the simple pleasures. Youngster goes fishing in the company of cattle, taken by Sandy Jones. I couldn't resist adding this pic of Amanda Atkinson's two perfect puppies, Cinder and Char, enjoying the rainbow in Gouverneur. And Paul Edgar's dog Rio very impressively managing 3 toys.
You want to get in my hand? Okay.
Finally, Steve Smith is the chipmunk whisperer. He says he has 6 that he's training. Keep on sending it to 7. Emily Griffin, 7 News.
Peanuts. I don't know how many